Welcome to our special plenary session on completing Europe whole and free. Now, we have an excellent lineup this afternoon of leaders to speak about the relevance of the vision of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. And it's my privilege to introduce them in just a moment. But first, a few words on context. In April of this year, the Atlantic Council convened a major conference surrounding the concept of a Europe whole and free, at which U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, and a host of European foreign and defense ministers gathered to showcase Europe's transformation and to address the considerable challenges remaining. The horrors of the two world wars and the dangers of the Cold War would not have been followed by the feats of a wall coming down, a curtain being drawn, and former adversaries becoming allies and partners without a vision and without a strategy. That vision was of a Europe whole and free, and the strategy became NATO and EU enlargement, coupled with forging a new partnership with Russia. However, Russian aggression in Ukraine reminds us that the hard-won achievements of the past cannot be taken for granted. Now, it's a great honor to welcome as our keynote speaker His Excellency Bujar Nishani, President of Albania. Albania is a critically important NATO ally and emerging energy hub in Southeast Europe. The President is a dedicated Atlanticist and has had a distinguished career in public service before becoming the President of his country in July 2012. He previously served as Albania's Minister of Justice and twice as his country's Minister of Interior. Mr. President, we are so very, very honored to have you with us. After President Nishani's keynote remarks, he will be joined by a distinguished panel, including His Excellency Aleksander, Kwaśniewski, former President of the Republic of Poland, His Excellency Daniel Mitov, newly appointed Foreign Minister of Bulgaria, and Her Excellency Palacio, former Foreign Minister of Spain. President Kwaśniewski, a distinguished member of the Atlantic Council's International Advisory Board, was a key player at the famous roundtable negotiations in Poland that brought the peaceful transformation of Poland from communism to democracy. A co-founding member and first chairman of Poland's Social Democratic Party, President Kwaśniewski was co-author of his country's new democratic constitution. It was under his leadership that Poland joined NATO in 1999, and thanks to his efforts that it became a member of the EU in 2004. Minister Mitov boasts a fascinating resume despite his young age. In 2006, he became executive director of the Democracy Foundation and then vice president of Democrats for a Strong Bulgaria party. Directly prior to his current post, he worked for the U.S. National Democratic Institute in Iraq, where he was program manager of the Political Party Development Program. Ms. Palacio is a highly active member of the Atlantic Council's Board of Directors, for which we are grateful. She's former foreign ministry of her great country, former member of the European Parliament, and an accomplished international lawyer. She is currently a member of the Supreme Consultative Body to the Spanish government on legislation and regulation. So thank you to this very prestigious group of speakers who have joined us here today for this important occasion. With that, I will now turn the stage over to President Nishani. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Honorable Mr. Huntsman, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me from the outset to thank the Atlantic Council and all the partner institutions that supported it during the perfect organizing of the summit in the impressive city of Istanbul. I would like to thank the organizers for the pleasant invitation extended to me and the warm welcome to all the people who facilitate the participation and cooperation in this summit. The Atlantic Council has aggrandizing its profile and activity throughout the years by enhancing the specter of the issues it deals with and by including the distinguished personalities of politics, businesses, etc. in its events as well. Hence, the summit, by focusing on the transatlantic relations, is trying to strengthen the inclusion and cooperation of the transatlantic community, aimed in finding the most efficient means and policy in facing and resolving the challenges which we are globally facing at the present days, stretching from the regional and world energy all the way to the economic and political ones. In this aspect, the initiative undertaken by the Atlantic Council to hold this summit that aims to gather heads of governments and leading business figures in order to promote a greater community sense, the increase of responsibilities towards our common fate and cooperation in one of the most dynamic and important regions on a global scale from a geopolitical and economic viewpoint deserves to be hailed and appreciated. Distinguished friends, nowadays we are living at a time when security cannot be called and considered as guaranteed solely because the things are progressing well in our countries. Being part of certain region and Euro-Atlantic community, we must not feel safe and sound asleep even when our neighbors are doing well, because the security of any one of us could be threatened at any moment in various forms from somewhere far away or close by. For quite some years, we have identified and have become cautious of continuous security threats and challenges, such as the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, cross-border crime, international terrorism and organized crime, drugs, human being and weapon trafficking, cyberspace attacks, climate change, economic and financial crisis, even massive epidemics such as Ebola recently, etc. All these recent threats, in front of which no country or region, regardless how prosperous it might be, cannot feel and remain intact or unharmed. In front of global challenges and threats, there is no other way out rather common and well-coordinated efforts and actions, continuous strengthening of the regional and beyond of the transatlantic cooperation. In this aspect, Albania has provided its modest support and contribution to the initiatives and institutions of regional character and in the framework of the North Atlantic Alliance as well by cooperating with its partners in the first front line of the efforts carried out for peace and security in the world. Albania has provided contribution with military experts and troops and civilians in various missions to Afghanistan, Iraq, Chad, Georgia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, and will continue to do the same whenever it would be necessary and required. This has been a small contribution in a global scale, but great at the same time, keeping in mind our capacities and resources. The most recent example was the cooperation with Canada to supply the Kurdish Peshmerga who are fighting against ISIL in Iraq with weapons and ammunition. The already proven readiness of Albania has been known and recognized also by our partners as an expression of the Albanian people's dedication and commitment to serve and defend the global freedom and security. My country has already proven itself a deservingly NATO member, and I remain fully convinced that our common coordination and action will be strengthened at the same time our countries will further increase the cooperation serving global security, peace, and freedom. Distinguished participants, we have just commemorated the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, but as was clearly understood by the statements of the former Soviet Union President Gorbachev, who called the support of Europe to the independence of Kosovo and Albanians and other countries of former communist bloc into NATO mistakes, the tensions between the democratic West and Russia have greatly increased, especially after the Ukraine crisis. Gorbachev criticized the United States as well by accusing them to have been engulfed by triumphalism after the fall of the former communist bloc, and by adding that Europe would become insignificant in the world if it would not be able to safeguard its own security. Is the world today truly at the brink of a new Cold War, and will the bloodsheds in Europe and Middle East continue to represent an increasing concern and threat of humanity? How will we manage to resolve these conflicts rather than by increasing dialogue and cooperation among world leaders? The fall of the Berlin Wall 25 years ago is a symbol that marked an end and a beginning as well. It marked at the same time the beginning of an excruciating labor and extremely important reflection on a global scale about the war. Consequences, work, and difficulties lying ahead. It's our duty and burden of the political, economical, and social leaders to find the language of dialogue and to agree on the common good of humanity and the future of the upcoming generations. The brutal annexation of Crimea by Russia, which was accomplished through the implementation of the fait accompli policy, by using blackmail and force in violation of the agreements signed by Russia itself, and of the international law, represents a dangerous precedent that could impact the long-term stability of the European space and its surroundings. The comparison to Kosovo is a weak attempt to justify it by using a precedent. The independence of Kosovo was a consequence of the violent and non-consensual disintegration of former Yugoslavia, which was accompanied by ethnic cleansing from the chauvinist regime and military machinery of Milosevic at that time. The failure of international efforts to resolve that crisis, thanks also to the lack of willingness of Milosevic's part, made unavoidable the international intervention led by NATO to rescue and save a people from genocide and to restore regional peace and security unavoidable. Albania has strongly condemned Russia's intervention in Ukraine as an infraction of international right and violation of the territorial sovereignty and integrity of that country, by calling and appealing for respect for the international law and right. Russia's behavior against Ukraine is threatening to start a chain of dangerous developments not only for Russia alone, but for the entire Euro-Atlantic space. Albania supports the stand of the international community to halt and obstacle the Russian position and expansion, which is continuing to this very day through unjust maneuvers, separatist attacks, and unjustified violations of the armistice. The developments unfolding in Ukraine are teaching us that the challenges to the energy security due to the pressure exercised to increase the Russian gas price towards Europe should be resolved by finding alternative pathways. The TAP project represents an alternative gas source towards Europe that includes many countries of our region, while suggesting the possibility of other supply branches towards the neighboring countries. The TAP project must be encouraged by being developed with the participation of all by enabling the Balkans region to be integrated into a European energy system. In another hotspot of the Middle East, Syria is continuing to cause increasing concern. Albania stresses that carry out typical cruel actions of a dictator with no future. Bashar al-Assad has no place in the future of Syria and already have lost the legitimacy to govern his own country and people. Regarding the continuous unstable situation in Iraq, Albania has always expressed its appreciation for the efforts carried out by the international community to stabilize it and to establish the rule of law all over its territory. Albania has emphasized its deep concern about the deterioration of security situation in Iraq and strongly condemns the terrorist attacks. My country is following in the same line with the appeal made by the international community in order to have all the democratic forces in Iraq work together for the democratic future of that particular country. Meanwhile, the civilized world is determinedly fighting the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, which has established a certain kind of feud in Syria by collecting taxes, selling electricity, and exporting oil in order to finance its military activities. That is why their attacks in Iraq, besides demonstrating a sort of unprecedented and never before witnessed savagery in modern times, are mainly focused in the oil-rich areas. ISIS' intention, it's not just to establish an Islamic caliphate, since many of its inhuman attacks and executions have been carried out against their Muslim brothers, but the rule and enrichment of a group of radical extremists deprived of any kind of religious or social ideology. The Balkans countries are dealing with and are trying to prevent also the dangers of hundreds of foreign fighters who, lured by empty and false financial and spiritual promises, are temporarily being mobilized, filling the ranks of Islamic State cruel extremists. This fight is being conducted every day by drafting, passing, and implementing a new legal framework, and by coordinating with various law enforcement and intelligence agencies of the European Union and NATO, and by closely cooperating also with partners agencies of our strategic ally of the United States. ladies and gentlemen, although a small country, Albania remains a fundamental geopolitical factor for peace and security in the Balkans. Also due to the fact that many Albanians that live in some of the neighboring countries play a constructive role. Cautious about this, we firmly support and implement the strengthening of good neighborly relation, regional dialogue and cooperation, and the integration of all our countries into the European Union. Setting our sights towards the Euro-Atlantic future has stimulated a new spirit of dialogue and cooperation in the Balkans. Serbia and Kosovo have sat down to talk, aiming to resolve the open issues between them and reaching a series of important agreements facilitated by the European Union. Kosovo has cautiously conducted these talks and negotiations, although many of its wounds from the bitter past spent under the Serbs are still unhealed. The independent Kosovo proved even to the most skeptics that it is and will be a stability factor in the region. The countries that have not yet recognized its independence should do so as soon as possible, and its Euro-Atlantic integration and its institution into regional initiatives would contribute to secure and stability in our region and beyond. It is already high time for the countries of our region, which once upon a time was called the powder cake, to leave behind once and for all the bitter history and grudges and ill feelings of the past, and to turn the eyes full of optimism towards the common European future. The economic and financial crisis did not spare almost any country by demonstrating how important the sustainable economy is for our common security, especially finding new resources and energy supply. The regional and beyond cooperation should be materialized by drafting and implementing projects aimed to create a modern, common regional energy infrastructure and its inclusions in the energy map of Europe. Strengthening the dimension of security in the traditional and contemporary concept in the Balkans region should take place in the quickest possible way and through a more coordinated cooperation with the European Union. Security in the energy sector can be achieved through constructing and modernizing the regional interconnection networks, securing the oil and gas networks from east to west through Balkans pipelines. This would increase the special role of the region as an actor of weight and importance for the very future of the European Union. In the light of the developments in Ukraine and relations between the European Union and Russian Federation, our continent will gain more if it would guarantee its security by including the Balkans in its energy map as well, and not only in its political and economic one. From this viewpoint, the geopolitics of the Balkans region that serves as the main connecting path between East and West would wear a special weight and significance. This need would make Balkans integration indispensable for Europe itself, because its actual positioning as a region whose borders are surrounded by European Union but not integrated in it yet would be harmful for both sides. Balkans' perspective as a new economic development region and energy hub would enable the European Union to overcome more easily the upcoming political, economical, and energy challenges that are appearing in the horizon. The 5 annual meetings already held among the heads of states of Albania, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Kosovo have served to this spirit and to meet this scope. We have stressed in them the indispensability of intensifying the economic and trade cooperation, the accomplishing of common projects where the priority would especially rest on constructing a modern infrastructure and establishing a regional energy system. The commitment of our Western Balkan countries to the common Euro-Atlantic and European values represents the safest platform for the further enhancement and consolidation of the relation among our countries. We unwaveringly believe that the full-fledged Euro-Atlantic integration benefits regional and European Union peace and stability by assessing that this would provide a contribution to peace and political and economical stability in the Euro-Atlantic space as well. Distinguished participants, the major projects in the region and beyond it to build oil and gas pipelines, which include Albania and neighboring countries, are the Transatlantic Adriatic Pipeline, TAP, is the shortest path of the southern gas corridor connecting Europe to the new gas well springs in the Caspian and Middle East regions. The Adriatic-Ionian gas pipeline has been proposed to build the natural gas pipeline from Albania all the way to Split in Croatia, through Montenegro and Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the LNG terminal in Albania coastline is a terminal that would be used and serve to transport the natural gas towards Europe through Italy. The development and modernization of the energy sector aimed at guaranteeing the consumer security with energy supply represents one of the main scope of Albanian authorities regarding the achievement of a sustainable social and economical development and a rapid European integration as well. The Southeast Europe and European Union countries have signed the Energy Community Treaty in order to increase competitiveness and the security of energy resources supply on the regional level. Our long-term objective consists and will continue to be the establishing of a European integrated regional market. These objectives can be achieved by increasing the producing and transmitting capacities of energy, such as using renewable energy, increasing the effectiveness of energy use, implementing the TAP project, building new lines of electric energy transmission, and to cooperate on the network of regional. The efforts of all our countries would be more effective if each separate country will coordinate and co-act with other countries by implementing a visionary and long-term European and regional strategy for further developing an actual energy resources and infrastructure. Besides realizing the regional strategy of energy development, it is necessary to found and establish regional executive structure that would implement this strategy and common projects. We must act quickly to establish a regional energy market in order to avoid the difficulties that we can run into to guarantee a total energy security of reasonable cost for our region. Materializing our common transatlantic willingness to increasingly act in coordination and cooperation, incited and urged by the need to have a clear and feasible vision, will serve as tools and guarantees for a safe future in a world where challenges and dangers appear suddenly from nowhere, even from where we would not think of. In conclusion, I would like to wish to this summit on energy and economy good luck and successful in fulfilling and achieving its scope. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me invite you and your colleagues, let me invite President Kwaśniewski, Foreign Minister Anna Palacio, Foreign Minister Mitov to join us on the stage, and we'll begin our conversation. I'm Damon Wilson. I'm Executive Vice President at the Atlantic Council. I'm delighted to welcome you to what we want to have now is a conversation on what we call completing a Europe whole and free. This session is on the record, and please, if you haven't turned off your cell phone, please do so now. I want to encourage you to follow along the conversation and contribute to the conversation by feeling free to tweet using the hashtag #ACSummit, as many of you already have. We're going to begin with a bit of a conversation on stage, and I'll try to use some remaining time to turn to the audience for your questions. But I wanted to tee up our conversation by referring back to what Governor Huntsman started with. For about 25 years, the United States and the transatlantic community had a common strategy, a common vision of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. It was built on the backbone of a strategy that was a strategic, a deeper partnership with Russia that helped transform former adversaries into allies through the process of NATO enlargement, and that really focused on the deepening of European integration itself. Yet if you look at all three of those issues, the partnership with Russia, NATO enlargement, EU integration, all three are in trouble today. And so I think what we want to get into in this conversation is, are we still committed to this vision? And if so, what's the right strategy given today's dramatically different circumstances? So I thought maybe we could pick up on some of the remarks that President Nishani offered in his opening. And President Kwaśniewski, maybe I'll start with you. You're here as one of the architects of a Europe whole and free, having shepherded Poland itself into the NATO alliance and pushed it forward into the European Union. And you have continued to be a very forceful voice on the prospect that this vision remains open for others, particularly in Ukraine. Yet today in Ukraine, we see this project under assault by President Putin and his policies. So I wondered if you could offer us a few thoughts on how you see where we are with this when we have a Russia that essentially is trying to reverse the outcome of the post-Cold War. Is there even a prospect for a country like Ukraine being part of this vision?
Well, I understand that we have a short time, and I will try to be as brief as possible. And I start with first remarks. The last 25 years were fabulous, fantastic, and especially I'm speaking as a former president of Poland, 1995-2005. We achieved much more as we expected. We are free, we are sovereign, we have a good economy, maybe one of the best in Europe now. We have strengthening position of European Union. Donald Tusk, former Prime Minister of Poland, will be President of European Council. First time the representative of new member state will be such ruling person in EU. We felt last 25 years that we are secure, and frankly speaking, we have to know now that this best time is finished. If some who will ask when we will have a better time, it's necessary to say it was in the past. And that is quite pessimistic opinion, but I think if you want to have good, realistic, pragmatic politics now, it's necessary to understand that we are in bad situation with a lot of elements, of factors of the situation. The first factor is crisis. The crisis in the world, which started in the United States a little bit earlier, in Europe 2008-9, showed that the concept of this fully liberal or neoliberal economy is exhausted. We cannot continue this concept of development, and this crisis created a lot of real problems like unemployment among young people, growth on the level of 0% or less, problem with the banking system, the loss of trust into financial organizations and institutions, etc., and created a lot of problems which, for some opponents or, how to say, critics of the West, are the good argument the West is in crisis. The West is weaker as it was 20 or 25 years ago. And that's point number one. The point number two, I think even not Putin started with politics, because I will speak some words about Putin in details, but I think the crisis created such feeling in many places of the world that the real alternative, ideological, economical, political alternative to this Western style, the Western concept of politics exists. First, the China showed that, okay, we can accept market economy, but we don't accept Western democracy. We can have Communist Party ruling the state and everything is okay. Then we had such resonance of that in Africa. In Africa today, the Chinese concept is much more popular as Western concept. And it's necessary to understand that after this first wave of unbelievable successes of democracies, because frankly speaking, we never had so long list of democratic states in the history, what happened in the 90s, 95, 2000. But today, we have very visible regress. We have less of such countries, and even if we have no less countries by far, that we have such expectations that probably this Western style of politics is not so important. Point number three, Mr. Putin. I think Mr. Putin is absolutely aware that now is the best time for rehabilitation or re-establishment of Russia as a superpower. Because the West is weak. America is extremely weak, especially after the last election. You have 2 years of some kind of combat between the Congress and Senate with the president. And Russians, they are sure, and the West is also, I mean, European Union is weak. I think only surprise for Mr. Putin last month is the position of Chancellor Merkel, because frankly speaking, he didn't expect that she will be so tough, and she will continue this very, very strong politics to Russia. And I think 80% of Ambassador Ischinger said during the last panel, I'm ready to support. That's his correct analysis of the situation in Russia. But the first point is Putin wants to reestablish Russia as a superpower. That is his goal. That is his personal goal. He wants to be, in the history of Russia, among the most important leaders for these countries. His position is not to be somehow between Gorbachev, Yeltsin, and his successor. He wants to be among such leaders like Peter the Great, Katrina the Great, Joseph Stalin, and Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin now. And this is not a joke. This is not what I want to say, to be, how to say, original in this audience. I discussed with him this politics, and that is his idea. Russia should be superpower again. And frankly speaking, we observers from the abroad, we have nothing to say negative about it. That's his legitimate goal of the president of Russia. But what is not acceptable? Not acceptable are methods. Because everything what happened last month is absolutely against rules of international law, against the rules of friendly neighborhood, against the rules of documents which were signed by Russia, because Russians from the very beginning after collapse of Soviet Union, decided to accept and to respect Ukrainian sovereignty, territorial integrity, and they signed such documents in so-called Budapest Memorandum 94. So everything what happened last month is against everything what was decided before by Russian Federation, by the predecessor of Mr. Putin, President Yeltsin, and that is something what we have to say openly, because how to work with the country which don't respect signed documents, rules of the politics, etc. But Putin will continue this politics. And I think we have to know that his main goal concerning Ukraine is not to keep Crimea, because annexation of Crimea is fact. And I tell you, I don't see the concept how we can even discuss the Crimean case in the next, I don't know how many decades. Crimea is, for the history of the world, next Northern Cyprus with division, Transnistria. That is a long-term problem, unsolvable, frankly speaking. But Putin is not only interested about Donetsk and Lugansk. He is there. His main idea and his main goal is to have entire, I repeat, I underline, entire Ukraine as a part of Eurasian Union. It means as a part of the zone of Russian influence. And he has quite good chances to do it, because Putin has a lot of instruments. He has money, he has gas, he has oil, he has propaganda, he has fifth column in Ukraine, he has a lot of it, and he has quite weakness of the West. And what is necessary to add, Putin has a lot of time. His first term will finish next 4 years, then he will be re-elected for next 6 years term, then he will probably change the constitution again, and then, you know, he's forever, probably. And then it means that we cannot compare the space of maneuvers of Western politicians and Mr. Putin. That is very important to understand. And then last, because I know that it's no time for such long debate, what we, the West, should do. I agree. We are Democrats. We should protect all kinds of chances of dialogue. We should try to mitigate Mr. Putin. And I think the sanctions, that is a chance to, not to change of Russian politics, but to mitigate this politics. I think the prices of oil, that is the next element, which is extremely important in this situation. But at the end of the day, it's necessary to ask Mr. Putin what is his goal. Because if his goal is to violate Ukrainian wish of sovereignty, of independence, we cannot, by rules, we cannot accept it. If he wants to debate how this modern Ukraine should be located between the West and Russia, what kind of guarantees of the security Ukraine should have, membership of NATO, probably not, but some kind of other guarantees. How to accept the willingness of Ukraine to be part of European structures. Everything we can discuss, and we are ready to discuss, and we propose this discussion. But the problem is that until now, the answer, the response from Russian side is, no, we are not interested. And it's a lot of such unacceptable lies, that who did all this annexation of Crimea? Some green man, some unknown people from nowhere. Who is doing all the things in Lugansk and Donetsk? We know very well, the world knows, and we have to speak openly and loudly about it. All these actions of separatists are financed, are supported by Russia, are supported by Kremlin. And I think we are in an extremely difficult time. We are close to the beginning of new Cold War. And of course, that is a huge task of everybody in the world to say, no, we are ready to discuss about this dialogue and positive solutions. But, and I agree again with Ambassador Ischinger, what we have to show to Putin is our united position, our solidarity. Without that, we have no chances. And as far as America and European Union will work together, and as far we will say, no, we cannot accept such methods, we cannot accept such politics, Ukraine has a chance to survive, and we have a chance to protect this peace, this situation which we achieved in the last 25 years, which were unbelievable, were fantastic in the history of the mankind. Is possible to do it? Yes, I think we can. I will repeat very, very famous slogan of one of American politicians. Yes, we can. Still we can. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me turn to Minister Palacio, if I may. Madam Minister, you were Foreign Minister of Spain when we had a very different relationship with Russia. And you've just heard President Kwaśniewski say that he doesn't think Putin will stop with what he has in Ukraine today. Is the idea of a Europe whole free and peace almost anachronistic right now? And in the face of what's happening, can the transatlantic community remain united around a sufficient strategy to deter aggression?
Well, let me begin by saying that for me, one of the highlights in my political and my life was the signing of the accession treaty of the new, the Europe, the beginning of this Europe at peace, whole and free. However, we have to understand that this was 95 to 2005. President Kwaśniewski has said that he took the best years, and he's right. Why? Because in the end, the translation of this Europe whole, free, and in peace was the frontispiece of our security strategy paper that starts, believe it, Europe has never been so prosperous, so secure, and so free. It's still theoretically, it's still valid. But honestly, you start reading this sentence and you don't go on. Europe has never been so secure, so prosperous, and so free. And I think that you have to understand that the world has changed. It's obvious. But if the world has changed for a group of people, this has been for Europeans. Why? Let me just give you some hints, because we don't have much time. First, we have within the European Union a country governed by someone that openly says that authoritarianism, this is Orban, it's Hungary, authoritarianism is great, and that this liberal democracy, it's not that good. So, perplexity that our criteria, we took for granted that whoever joined the Union just share these criteria. And by the way, there is no way in our treaty how we can expel or how can we can act against someone that makes such a statements. And this goes even further, because as Europeans, we are a construction in law and by law. But what we face is that this idea of multilateralism, of soft power, that is the translation of this idea of the rule of law prevalent in the world, just is being, it's being undermined, among others by us. Let me just remember the outcome of the Copenhagen climate conference. Now I hope that in Paris we will be more realistic. But we Europeans, we thought that we would state our targets and everybody would follow, because this was the natural way that things happen. Well, it doesn't. Someone in a conference the other day told me, well, the day for us to consider withdrawing the sanctions on Russia, Russia has to withdraw. I say, come on, Russia has never accepted that they were there. So for a construction that is based on the Westphalian approach, so member states, we are in a difficult intellectual challenge. And of course, our citizens, President Kwaśniewski has mentioned how the crisis has impacted our youth, our citizens in general. And this, what has this made? Well, it's the construction is full of bickering and of blaming and shaming. In the south of Europe, Angela Merkel, that is the leader right now, is painted with Hitler mustache. But we Spaniards are painted by the build with a donkey, and it's like that. We have this idea, this goes on these centrifuge forces that we see in Catalonia, we see in Scotland, because there is a malaise that just also has another very concerning aspect, which is not just the Orbans, and there are many. I was with foreign minister after the elections in Ukraine, and we were said, what we need in Europe is a Putin, just a Putin. And these were Europeans in Brussels. Come on, so what I think that we have to accept is that we are faced with a big change. And I'm confident because in the end, yes, we are 6% of the global population, but we are aging. Okay, but we are the healthiest. We are still among the top, the top in R&D. Our Rosetta program is now on this comet. We have to regain self-confidence. And what I suspect is that, honestly, we need a wake-up call. And what will be the wake-up call? It can come from many places, and why not from Russia, if Russia just goes on. So in a way, we are in a kind of neo-medieval situation where nothing is clear, so pre-Westphalian world, and it's, I think that in another way we are in a kind of 1930s moment, but I'm confident. We are 6%, but we are 25% of the GDP of the world, and yes, we are 50% of the social expenditure of the world, and we have to address that. But honestly, if we regain self-confidence, we can do it.
Very much, Madam Minister. Let me turn to Minister Mitov. First of all, thank you for coming to the Istanbul Summit so newly in your tenure as Foreign Minister of Bulgaria. And your country sits astride both a Black Sea region as well as being embedded in the Balkans. And you're sitting around a table now in Brussels at the EU, where the EU vision for the Balkans was a Thessaloniki vision, the full integration of the Balkans into the institutions of Europe, and an Eastern partnership with Europe's East. How viable now, given the situation, do you see these strategies? Where are we headed with European integration now that you've joined the Council, the ministers in Brussels discussions on these issues?
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here. And let me first start with a continuation of what Foreign Minister Palacio said. In these 25 years on which we are focusing, remember that we started at certain points after the fall of the Berlin Wall and after the boom of the democratization. We started talking about the end of history and of the fact that there's no alternative to liberal democracy. Well, 25 years later, we are realizing that it was so because we were not challenged. There was nothing on the other side that could challenge us seriously. That's first point. And second, we need to realize that if we don't start shaping history, someone else is going to shape it for us. So that's why, as Ms. Palacio just said, we need to regain self-confidence. We need to be sure that what we believe in, the values which lie in the fundament of on the basis of our identity as democratic countries, and I speak about the whole transatlantic community, those values are worth fighting for. We have forgotten that. We have very much started taking them for granted and not defending them sufficiently. So that's kind of an introduction that I wanted to make. Second point, I'm absolutely convinced that right now we are facing a long standoff on ideological basis. And we need to prepare very well for it. We know where we are, we know what we stand for, and we need unity in order to defend it. But we don't know what's on the other side. What is on the other side, we still need to figure out. Or someone needs to tell us. If there's basic type of honesty, we need to put on the basis of future eventual dialogue with Russia first this. Who are you? What do you agree with? And what do you exactly disagree with when it comes to values? Because every time we hear a message from Russia, we are told that the West is trying to impose values which are not acceptable for Russia. Very well. But what is acceptable? What kind of social construct, what kind of social architecture is trying to be built on the other side? Who are we talking with? I think that's the basis and the first step that we all need to figure out how to clear. Because when you talk to someone, you need to know who that is in very deep terms, not only in military or geostrategic terms. When we speak about the enlargements, I think, of course, there was certain type of enlargement fatigue in the European Union, and that is clear. But the enlargement process needs to continue. And the talks about it and the negotiations need to continue, and we are fully supportive of that. And we're trying to build up connections with all the countries which have the aspiration to be future European Union members in order to help them in that path, in order to share with them our successes and in order to share with them, of course, our failures, so they figure out how not to repeat them. But there is, of course, the dialogue around the table you mentioned about the enlargement continues. This process has not stopped. It will be prolonged for sure, but it's not going to stop. And if I need to convey a message from here to the European Commission and the European leaders in general, is to encourage those countries, to visit them more often, to pay attention to them, and to be sure that all the candidate countries are in line with the European Union's policies, and especially with the European foreign and security policy. That's very important. So that is something that we need to emphasize very clearly. In energy terms, what we are facing, of course, on the Balkans is quite discouraging for now, because first, we are one of the most vulnerable regions in energy terms. First, we are very much dependent on one single supplier, which is Russia. Second, we are exposed to supply disruptions all the time. Third, the prices are up to 40% higher than in Western Europe, the gas prices, I mean. And the underdevelopment of the infrastructure and the connectivity are extremely at high level. So what we need to focus on, of course, is diversification, expansion, modernization of the energy infrastructure, energy efficiency, connectivity, competitiveness. And the region, at the same time, provides huge opportunities. Turkey and Greece are good gateways for diversification of the gas supplies. Mr. President, he spoke about the TAP project. Of course, we need to interconnect our gas network with all the surrounding countries. We need to think about the electricity markets as well. And here the initiative for creating an energy union is extremely important. That's the word union is key here. Now we have to show unity. Now we have to think about how to further integrate Europe. Crises like in Ukraine or in the Middle East, they're a challenge. And they put an end to these 25 years of comfort. But they're also an opportunity. They're an opportunity to realize who we are, what are we fighting for, where we stand, what do we stand for, and continue our deeper integration in order not to be anymore in situations like this and fight whatever challenge might come up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Let me come back to President Nishani, who began this conversation. In 2008, when the alliance split over how to proceed with Georgia and Ukraine in the face of opposition from Russia, Albania and Croatia made it through. And so there was a sense that maybe the Western Balkans are a different issue. In your mind today, is integration in the region, in the Western Balkans, insulated from what's happening in Ukraine? And therefore, you need to just face the skepticism maybe from Brussels or issues of rule of law? Or is there a new story of external opposition, of Russian influence, Russian opposition to the this idea that the entire Western Balkans will be integrated into Europe?
Thank you. I'll be very briefly on that because I had a chance to have lots of times in my speech. I fully agree with President Kwaśniewski, who mentioned that objectives of Mr. Putin, President Putin, are not just in Ukraine, but even beyond, in different ways, different things. And Balkan region is not excluded by these objectives. We have just to think and to recall in our mind that Balkan region provided a terrible war even a decade before. Thousands of people still are not founded in this region. Terrible time, horrible time, killing, cleansing of the territories. And this part of continent, it's a natural part of Europe. It's a kind of bridge between Europe and the other eastern side. It's full of possibilities. And even the people in this region, besides the history and the past, have suffered so much, deserve to prosper and to live a better life. We have seen the Europe to prosper during the 4 or 5 last decades, but even thinking a lot about the security. And the security has been provided especially by the West European, together with United States in framework of NATO. And it's absolutely a reality that NATO is nowadays the most successful alliance. It's not a military one, it's a political one also. And on that framework, the Balkan region is still in a threat. And if we can see some provocation to enlight again some crashes between peoples and nations in this region, European Union cannot be out of this difficulties because the Balkan is part of the European area. So, being a NATO member and European Union member for all countries in the Balkan region, it's absolutely in my belief, in Albanian belief, it's the best possibility and the best way to work together. I mentioned in my speech that the Balkan has considered as powder cake in the past, but nowadays exactly, and it's a reality that exists lots of chances in this region because we have learned a lot from our past, but we have to be very encouraged not to reflect again what we have suffered in the past. Not to forget, but to reflect for our common future. So the European Union project, it's the best one. We know very well that it's not just a decision which might get overnight, because it's a process and all the countries of this region have to be prepared for being a member of this family in economical side, in infrastructure terms, and all around of such things. But we do not see any other alternative. And security and development can be only together. I see difficulties to consider them separately in this way.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. President. We started just a few minutes late, so we're going to move into a reception fairly quickly, but I wanted to turn to the audience, and I'm going to challenge you for a lightning round, if you will. I want to take 2 quick questions, and if I could ask you to catch my attention, within 30 seconds, pose a direct question, and please let me know who up on stage you'd like to address the question to. Let me turn to the gentleman on the side here, and Ian Brzezinski there, too. So please, one in the back and on the corner, please. And please be as quick as possible. Thank you.
European Union said no to Turkey accession. Is it mean that after Berlin Wall, fall of Berlin Wall, EU trying to create new wall between Christian club and rest of the world?
Thank you. Good question. Ian Brzezinski, please. And Ariel will do you as well.
Our speaker spoke profoundly about the values the Western community has. And I would just say that, values are only as vibrant as one's willingness to stand up for, fight for, and sacrifice for those values. Today, those values are being trampled on in Ukraine. Yet the West, its military establishments, seem unwilling to provide Ukraine even the military assistance it needs to defend itself. And since this is an economic forum, I would say the West, the EU in particular, has proven unwilling to leverage its economic capabilities to support Ukraine. Look how weak the sanctions are. Think about it. A $12 trillion economy is unwilling to use the full force of its economic leverage against an economy 1/6 its size. Russia's a $2 trillion economy. What does it say about the West's commitment to its values when its response to Russia's invasion has been so weak, when the EU has been unwilling to really use the full force of its economic power against this aggression?
Terrific. Very, very briefly, Ariel, very briefly, because we'll have to come back and close with the panel. Yes. Speak. No, it's you're working.
Aaron Cohen with the Center for Energy and Natural Resources in Washington. I came back from Ukraine last night. I met people who gave up their businesses and their homes and went to fight in the east. Ukraine is dependent on Russian gas. What about Turkey allowing LNG to go through the Bosphorus into Ukraine and diversify its supply? What about the European contingency so that Putin knows what will happen to him and to Russia if they expand the warfare to include Nikolai, Kherson, Odessa, the northern part of the Black Sea, and threaten the rest of Central and Southern Europe? Thank you.
Thank you, Ariel. So let me start with Foreign Minister Mitov. You don't have to address every element here. We want to do quick 30-second responses. Basically, Turkey's future and relationship with Europe and stronger support for Ukraine, question mark.
Right.
Remember, 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
I'm going to enforce the lightning round.
I don't think Europe as a whole has said no to Turkey. We know very well that it is quite a complicated question. That the enlargement right now is in a delicate situation, as we've already explained. When it comes to the so-called installation around the border, I think here we have been very, very clear and very straightforward with our Turkish colleagues that this is not something directed against the Turkish state. It helps both of us to control better the border, where in vulnerable sectors where we cannot control the trafficking of people and illegal migrants.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Well,
Palacio.
you described the European Union as a Christian club. Frankly, I do not agree. First of all, because in many of our member states, around 14 to 15% of the population is Muslim. And they are as Spanish, as French, as German, as anybody else. That's my first response. You are right that the European Union is negotiating in bad faith. You are right. And I belong to the many European unions because I consider the Turks Europeans, as Turkey was the sick man of Europe. I think that we are negotiating in bad faith. We should negotiate in good faith, but I wonder to what extent European Union is still a priority for Turkey. Now, 1 second on values, because I think that this is a key question. I personally agree with you. Many Europeans agree with you, especially, by the way, in Poland, in the Baltic states, but in many other countries, my own, in the first place, people don't feel that values are at stake in Ukraine. We could discuss this even further, but this is part of this introspective morosity, just lack of self-confidence, lack of being able to project yourself and to stand by your values.
Thank you very much. And briefly, Mr. President, President Nishani first, and then we'll conclude with President Kwaśniewski.
About the Turkish membership, we cannot say because Albania is not a member of the European Union, but what we believe is that, yes, Turkey deserves to be a member of the European Union. It's an added value. I just to emphasize one more the question about the values, because I deeply believe in values, and such values, if we consider and we act based on such values, but in a common way, we will be very much successful. So I believe, and we have to respect and to preserve the values.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Final word, President Kwaśniewski.
Well, first, Turkey. In my political career, I was very much in favor of Turkish membership, but today it's necessary to ask Turks. They still want to be a member of the European Union, or they have a new idea or new prospect to be leader of the region, to play different and a little bit separate role. And I'm not so sure about this decision here in Ankara or in Istanbul. But I'm very much in favor of Turkish membership, and finally I think this membership would be best for Europe and very good for Turkey, or opposite. Best for Turkey and very good for Europe, because that is increasing potential of the continent. Second, I fully agree with Anna that, of course, we should keep our self-confidence, because we have a lot to propose. Even if we are accused as Europeans that we spend too much money for social affairs, it's necessary to say that the future of China, the future of India, is not to spend less for social affairs, but more. They will repeat this European model, because that is very much in sense of humanity. How you want to say to the people, to the workers, they have no rights. They should have it. For women, they have no rights, etc. Long story, but I think Europe is enough strong with our values, with our heritage, with our ideas, with our projects, and even more, you know. Normally in the Olympic Games, we are very much interested about this medal qualification. And normally that is the fight. In previous time it was United States, Soviet Union. Now that is United States, China. Who is first? But if you collect gold medals of European Union, we are twice better as China. We are better as China and the United States together. So that is my, you know, as a former president of Polish Olympic Committee, advice to all of us to be strong in our beliefs and to our self-confidence. But point number three, the good time is finished. And that is something what we have to know. The best period of the history in this in our life is finished. The last 25 years, collapse of Berlin Wall, collapse of Soviet Union, end of Cold War, liberalization or democracies everywhere, enlargement of the European Union, enlargement of NATO, everything, in my opinion, is finished. Now, the years which are coming, that is a test for all of us. What we'll do with NATO, how NATO will react if one morning you will listen in your radio that green men came to eastern Latvia. You know? Nobody knows from where, you know. Maybe they bought the uniforms on the corner of the street, as in Crimea. And then is a question. If NATO will react, we have a huge conflict in the world. If NATO will not react, means NATO doesn't exist. And this is bad news for our Albanian friends, for our other friends who count on this organization, and they are right. Because even with all kinds of weaknesses, European Union and NATO are the best. What we can have, what we can use, what we can believe. So time is extremely difficult. A lot depends on Turkish position, because I think this country today plays really, really very important role. And if Turkey will support these democratic values, these values of cooperation, of mutual understanding, of dialogue, would be great. If not, we'll have a problem. But my message to all of you, you are very experienced politicians, that is time of the real test is coming, and we should be prepared for that. I'm sorry that I'm not very much optimistic, but you know what is the difference between optimist and pessimist. The pessimist is a very well-informed optimist. So unfortunately, sometimes I felt that I'm too well-informed.
Mr. President, thank you for that. I think it's important. You end on a sober note, but pointing out that we are facing potentially a test of our community. And we've heard the warning that potentially we're in a period of the 1930s that could portend perhaps more disaster. We also heard from Foreign Minister Mitov about the opportunity, when presented with serious challenges, can we turn it into an opportunity for our community to reaffirm the values? And I think that's the test you refer to. I want to remind before we wrap up that we're going to invite all of our summit delegates to proceed to the reception that we'll be hosting for the delegates that's located in the Tea Lounge, which is on the other side of the hotel registration desk. And I just want to remind you for tomorrow, because of security, if you could just be sure to bring back your credentials and show up with your credentials, be wearing those. And then we'll start at 9 a.m. sharp in the morning with a discussion in this ballroom on Europe's energy security, on the challenges and opportunity behind that. So please join me in thanking our terrific discussants for this closing panel on Europe Whole and Free. Thank you so much.